Hi, welcome to today's creative session. I'm Zoe Buckland from the Christchurch campus. This is one of our studios here, and we're going to be creating a simple one-part wax wound on my hand with some professional products that we've got here today. I've already prepared a few things on my palette already, but I'll go through what we've got here today. I've got some coagulated blood, I've got a Ben Nye bruise wheel, and I've got some Vaseline, some Sin wax or FX wax, and just a bit of translucent powder, and also a bit of runny blood. If you haven't got all of these products already that are professional, you can actually just use, instead of some of these products like the bruise wheel, you can use different colour lipsticks or grease paint. And with the blood, you can actually use maple syrup and add in some food colouring. I'm just going to be creating this wax wound on this part of my hand today, just because it can be quite a nice solid place for it to be put. It does move around a little bit, but it's not going to hurt when we're pushing down on this part of the hand, so it's a good place to start to practice. So I'm just going to start by digging out some of this wax and putting it on my hand and just warming it up in my hands like this, so we can create a bit of a worm. This one's actually a little bit too big, so I'm just going to take a little bit off and pop it back in. So just kind of move it to what size you want. It's also good to warm it up just on the area that you're starting to use it, because it will let it get a little bit sticky. So something like that is quite good, and about that size would be quite good for the area that I'm covering. So I just like to push it down in the area that I want, and using my spatula, I'll anchor it down on one end and I'll anchor it down on the other end. Again, if I think I've got too much product, I'll just take it off and remove it like that and pop it on the edge there. Once I've done 2 anchor points like so, I'll work on blending out the sides. Any bits that you think look a little bit high, we kind of shave a little bit off if we want to. I want to make it look as seamless as possible, so just working your edges. The good thing about wax is that you can do this, you can actually work your edges really well. It's not going to go off or anything, and the more it warms up to your body, the better it's going to be blending wise. So just make it look as believable as possible. You don't need a whole heap of product either, because when you actually cut into it, it does go quite deep, and because of this part of the hand, it can be quite believable if you do have a bit of excess product. Once you've got quite a good amount of area covered, you can go in and use a little bit of your Vaseline and just add that to the wax and just melt it out. And this is a really good step just to make it look very believable. Apart from the shininess, it will just blend out anything that wasn't looking as seamless as before. So already we're creating this artificial area that we can then put a cut into. I personally don't like how this area can look quite shiny in comparison to like where you get all of the lines in your natural hand. So I can sometimes go in with my stipple sponge and just add a little bit of texture just to break up what your eye sees, because your eye will pick up on that. And once you add a little bit of texture on the outside, it just makes it a little bit more believable again. Okay, and just thinking about if you did have a cut on this part of your hand, it's going to start getting a little bit sore. So when we go through and do the cut, we are going to go through and start adding in bits of colour, okay? And just making sure you keep your spatula quite clean in between these bits, because we want to keep everything as tidy as possible. So I'm using a special effects spatula. You can probably use a blunt knife if you must, or a lollipop stick, but because I've got this available, I'll be using this today. And I like to use the pointier end to get more of a precise look. Just go in and cut straight down the middle of this wound. Okay, so haven't added any colour yet, but already that's starting to look a little bit yucky. So thinking about if we did actually cut our hand in the scenario that we're trying to portray here, Thinking of the depth of the wound, I always like to put a darker red in the areas where it's going to be deeper, just to make it look more believable. So I'm going to go in with a darker colour here. So again, if you don't have a bruise wheel, you could use a darker red lipstick. And going in, we're just going to put this straight inside here and kind of paint the skin that I've got inside. Cool, so thinking about the wound and the scenario you're trying to portray and what colours you're going to use to show different depths, I always use a darker red. If you don't have this bruise wheel, then you could use a darker red lipstick. And just use that in the deeper part of which you're trying to make look like the deepest part of the wound. And don't worry if you get a little bit on the outsides, we can move bits and pieces around because this is wax, it is quite movable. And this is just like a base colour because we will be adding blood, so don't worry if it gets a little bit messy because the nature of this type of special effect is it's going to be quite messy anyway. So keeping it, try and look at every angle because you might see this bit and then you've got a really quite clear bit in here, so just make sure you look at every angle of the wound, make sure it's kind of, you're covering all the area that you're trying to colour in. You can even go in and open it up a little bit if you must and pop a bit of colour more in there. And then for the outside, adding a little bit of the lighter red just because this part is more of a superficial cut, so it won't be as deep. So now we're going to go in and add a bit of the coagulated blood. This is more of a jammy kind of texture, and it's quite, you know, sticky. So again, like if you were going to think about using products from home, you could use like a jam if you wanted to. You'd have to just make sure that it didn't have any seeds or anything in it like that, because that would give it away that it wasn't real. So we're just going to try and put this in the deeper part. This is going to stay where it goes, so it's not going to run away like your runny bloods that we have as well, which we will be adding in just a second. So already you can kind of move your hand, get it to naturally go through the cut that you've made. It's starting to really take shape now. Using a little bit of the excess colour on the palette here, I'm just going to add a little bit of red just to the outside and blend it in using my hand, just because if you actually cut your hand, it is going to be a little bit red. It's not going to be like the colour of the rest of my hand. Giving it a little bit of like a bruised, raised appearance. I am just tapping with my brush because it is wax. If I start dragging, it will start changing the shape. And I'm quite happy with how it's looking shape-wise, so. Okay, now that I'm actually happy with how that's looking, so I'm just adding a little bit of powder just to get rid a little bit of the shine that we've got going on, and it's quite good for making it look real again. I'm just going to pat it in, and then I've got my big powder brush to just dust off any excess. If you don't have translucent powder, you can use baby powder. Cool. Once you're kind of happy with that, it's time for runny blood. So keeping in mind where you want your blood to be running to make it look more real. If you're going to have your hand up, you probably want to pour it down the wound so it starts going onto your wrist. Or if you're just going to be holding it like that, you can have it trickling down. I'm just going to go in from here because I've been working this way, so I don't mind if it pours down my hand like this. And just using it in here, and I'm just going to let it do its thing. If you think you need more as it goes, you can always add a little bit more, but as you can see, it will just do its own thing, and sometimes that's better because it's more of a natural effect. If you go trying to pour it all over the place, then it's going to not look as realistic. If you feel that it starts separating on your wax when you put your runny blood on there, which is quite normal for that to happen, a good trick to do is add a little bit of dishwashing liquid and add it into into your runny blood. That way it becomes a little bit more fluid, it doesn't separate like it was, and it again just adds to the realism of the wound. Almost kind of goes like a plasma-y kind of effect. So yeah, there we go. And that's it, guys, as simple as that really, 1-part wax wound. Thank you for watching. I hope you took away something from this, and have a good afternoon.